Hello, I'm Monique from JapanEasyReads. I'm a Japanese language teacher first and foremost, and more recently a teacher trainer, really passionate about comprehensible input and about making reading more inclusive and accessible, especially in a script heavy language like Japanese. So today I want to explore what happens when we reimagine early literacy in Japanese and ask the question, what if reading wasn't a test, but more of a bridge to connection, to confidence, and to joy? And what if more of our learners could feel capable, feel successful right from the very beginning? So, first of all, is it broken? Is language learning, in particular, reading instruction, broken? Not entirely, but could we do better? Are we unintentionally teaching only to the top tier? You know, those top 4%ers who get language no matter what? I think we might be. I've been fortunate to live in Japan, which is where I learned Japanese. But when I think back to my high school French, despite having a French name, I can really only remember the textbooks, the drills, the verb charts. And do I speak French now? That would be a hard no. And that's despite me really wanting to learn and be able to speak French. I practiced the dialogues, I highlighted all of the key language chunks and vocab and grammar points, but I just couldn't use it. Now, as a teacher, I wonder, what about the students who are not in that top 4%, the high flyers, the ones who are slipping through the cracks and who just don't get it, giving up because they don't see themselves as language people? And in Japanese in particular, the barriers come up early, and if we're honest, they often stay up. So, because why reimagine reading really is because in many Japanese classrooms, reading is really treated like a decoding test. We front load the script, we drill the kana and the kanji, we test for recognition. And then, surprise, surprise, we wonder why students don't enjoy reading or don't feel that they can read. But reading is not just decoding, it's much more than that. It's about fluency, it's about meaning, identity, and connection. And I feel strongly that we need to reimagine reading to include more learners and build more fluency and spark more joy. Several years ago, I shifted my teaching approach of script to focus more on input first. By input, I'm talking about oral input, the hearing, the listening. And I stopped testing hiragana every week and concentrated more on that oral input, chatting and connecting with the students. One student, Georgia, had always struggled, not just in Japanese, but across the board. And reading in Japanese felt completely out of reach for her. So when she read quite a simple but a long co-created story, she smiled and said, "I can't believe I just read that." And honestly, that moment really did change something for me and for her. She felt successful, she felt smart, she felt included. And that was the spark for the early literacy project that I'll be sharing today. So let's have a look at the research. Grabe and Yamashita remind us to read fluently, students need massive exposure, repetition, and implicit learning over time. So that's not just character memorization and test style tasks. So, what if instead of front loading script, we front loaded comprehension? What if the path to proficiency ran through pleasure and meaning? What if more students wanted to read? To build a reading experience that is more inclusive, more motivating, and more aligned with how language is actually acquired, we can look to self-determination theory of Deci and Ryan, which says that motivation grows when learners feel three things. They feel like they have some control. They feel that they can do this, and they feel like they belong. So let's have a look at how we can bring these three pillars into our classrooms. For autonomy, how can we invite student voice, agency, and ownership? When students talk and then read about things that matter to them, their pets, their family, the silly stories that they help create, reading becomes personal. How do we then help all students feel capable? As Dr. Liam Printer, a leading voice in language acquisition instruction, reminds us that when students experience choice and relevance, motivation and ownership grow. His podcast, The Motivated Classroom, is chock-a-block full of research-based insights and practical strategies, and I thoroughly recommend you to check that out. And how do we build relatedness? How can we build the emotional safety and connection, which is so essential for novice learners beginning their language journey? Belonging, I think, comes from the little things, the storytelling, the shared laughter, classroom routines, and the inside jokes. Using language with purpose, basically. So when students feel known and feel seen, they're much more willing to take risks. So the Early Literacy Project was a short-term collaboration with a primary Japanese language teacher. 1 term, 3 grades, 12 classes, 60-minute lessons per week, with a total of 350 students. The project really gave us an opportunity to trial different acquisition-focused activities and routines, and our priorities were oral input first, personalised questions and answers, really keeping the connection and relatedness happening, and a focus on meaning before memorisation. So we really maximise personalised oral input so that the students are hearing lots and lots of Japanese in meaningful, comprehensible ways. And to do that, we used high frequency words and chunks in our class discussions, so the students got repeated exposure to the most useful language right from the start. We focused on compelling oral input and personalised questions and comprehension of the meaning. And I was reminded about my dear departed mother, who would often say to me, less is more, Monique, less is more. And I think that is very much the case here. When we give learners less, we give them more space to succeed, more space to feel confident, and more space so they can follow along with the messages, and they can engage with the story or the message and not get lost decoding every word. We scaffolded strategically by using Romaji for low frequency words and for the oral input stage. And this was to help the students access in real time the meaning of the sounds that they were hearing, and also helped with minimising the cognitive overload. We made time also for both collaborative writing and collaborative reading as a recap of the oral language that was used in the lesson. And students need lots of repetition, as we know. So we recycled language in new and playful and unpredictable ways so that the input stayed really fresh while still being familiar. And this is an example of the Super 7 verbs. This is a term that was coined by Dr. Terry Waltz, a Chinese interpreter and teacher trainer. And this became the backbone of the curriculum. And Dr. Waltz has identified these core verbs that in any language will allow you the greatest opportunity to communicate in the greatest number of contexts. So the biggest bang for your buck. So an example here, the 5 main parts of the lesson was mindful reading or do now task in the form of a password. The oral input or the student voice. So this was the chance to really connect with the students and personalise the language to be able to really connect with the students. The collaborative writing was co-created with the students, and that was generally a recap of what language we'd been using that lesson, and not the whole lesson, but maybe just a recap of, depending on the year level, between 4 and 8 sentences. And then collaborative reading of that language, and we always finished with an exit ticket. And this is an example, a little bit clearer perhaps, of what the comprehension-based lesson looked like in a 30-minute block. Now, we had 60 minutes, but only 30 minutes was dedicated to the early literacy project. And what I like about this is that you can slot this into this format into any lesson length, really. You can shorten it or extend it further if you have more time. So the password to enter was a really great opportunity, not only to introduce or revise a high frequency word, but it also started the lesson with us connecting with the students with that shared routine. So basically, while the students lined up outside the classroom, one student was the password person who shared the new password with each of the classmates in Japanese, and the other person was the security person who allowed the students in when they were able to correctly give the password. And then the students, when they came in, they practiced some mindful writing of that password. So there was lots of connection before they even started the lesson. The student voice, there's some examples there of things that we did try: the one-word image, picture talk, calendar chit-chat, special person interview. And then the write and discuss is the collaborated writing, so co-creating a short paragraph or notes on the boards based on what we'd been talking about. And the teacher is the guides that whole process. So it's not an independent task, but the teacher is asking those questions to get the language that has been used. So we're recycling that in written form. And then reading it together. The choral reading was it came through with the students' feedback as a really important part of this process, where they felt really supported and capable and confident. The exit ticket allowed us to, again, revisit some of the language that we'd used, but we also used that as an opportunity to get some feedback from the students. And we did that with using this Plickers, which is an interactive assessment tool that uses individual cards for the students to answer multiple choice questions in real time. So we collated all of the fluency results over the period of 6 weeks that we were doing this project. So our goal really was to see whether the students were able to access the language in these books. So Boris was for year 2, Bergerman year 3, and Australia for year 4. So we wanted to know whether if we front-loaded with comprehension and implemented those comprehensible input strategies, whether that would then in turn impact the students' ability to read in script, and also how it impacted their confidence in reading in script. So at the very beginning, we did a pre-test, and this is just an example of the sample that was given to the students. Obviously, this is a pre-test, so the language here was really unknown to the students, but we really wanted to get an idea of their confidence of looking at that and what level they were approaching that reading with, whether they thought, yes, it's hard, but I can do this, or this is just too, what was their feeling about their ability, their perception of their reading ability. So we also asked the students then to respond, how confident do you feel when you read Japanese? So they were the response choices, and we were delighted to see that with just a few weeks, 6 weeks of input-rich routines, this is what we could see. Students were reading more. Their perceptions of the difficulty shifted, and more students were saying, this feels easier now. And that was not because they memorised more characters, but because the comprehension came first and they felt really supported. And this shift, I think, really reflects how rich input combined with autonomy, relatedness, and a sense of competence can really transform a student's relationship with reading. So just to explain the graph there, in May and in June, we tested for the students' confidence level, and you can see, particularly with the year 4s, their confidence in their own reading ability at the beginning of this was very, very low, and there's a definite shift and an improvement over those weeks and with all 3 levels. And this is perhaps what was, for me, really rewarding and encouraging. For the post survey that we did at the end of that 6 weeks shift, I asked a simple question, are you reading more Japanese now? And this is what they had to say, that for example, in year 2, 76% said in the affirmative, yes, or yes, a lot more. So 76%. But of that 76%, 17% responded a lot more. Likewise, in year 3, 22% identified that they were speaking a lot more. And very, very pleasing in year 4, we could see that 34% responded that they were reading a lot more, and the overall 87% is a huge jump up from that 1%. And the reading in Japanese, the perception then also really shifted as well. So I was really blown away with these numbers. So they're not just the numbers about the quantity of how much reading they were doing, but it really indicates a change in how the students are feeling about the reading. And when they get to choose what they read and when it feels doable and interesting, they want to keep going. And when I asked students what helped them succeed, their answers really did mirror the self-determination theory beautifully. Autonomy, we chose the characters. Competence, the repetition helped. We read it together. And relatedness, also, I like it when we read together because I don't feel lost. This one's one I really wanted to share here. I just love it. The student says, I feel good about my Japanese reading because there are a lot of people talking and it gets into my brain. So year 3 student then there was obviously meaning brain, but, you know, I like the fact that it's a brain. It feels like a bit of a character. It's got a personality now. But also it showed that we really did focus on trying to ensure that all students were able to listen to and use and interact with a lot of Japanese. So there were lots of people. It was very much a group feeling, and with that group feeling, there was that competence and relatedness, that connectedness, and that was a positive. So cold character reading was an approach that we also trialled, and cold character reading, just to give a bit of background, it's a reading approach developed by Dr. Terry Waltz, and the approach really does rely first on developing really sound, strong sound meaning connections of words and phrases, and that's by means of focused input in a variety of different contexts. So instead of front-loading script, we read about things that we have talked about that the students are interested in. This is an example of a co-created text, a cold character reading text that we did with the year 3 class. And the week before this, we had co-created the character together, the character called Tako, and we'd done that as a class. And we decided that, along with the name, that this character had a twin. And there were lots of giggles and connections made because we'd just been talking earlier and joking about twins that were in the class, 2 girls. So this connected really personally with the students and made the story even more engaging and relatable. So you'll see that we're using some simple, repetitive language that's packed with high-frequency structures like des, janai des, and desu ka. Because it was co-created, though, the students already understood the language. They knew the meaning of this language. So when we read it back together, it wasn't decoding, it was meaningful shared reading. And as one student said to me, it's like I know what's going on before I even read it. So Terry Waltz had said something that stuck to me, was that we want the students to be so familiar and comfortable with the language that we are using in the oral input that they can hear the little Japanese voice in their head. So that's what we're looking for, developing. So what does reading look like in action? I'm going to share a short clip of the year 3 students reading after we had co-written the text together. And this was their 3rd read through. So it's not, they're reading for meaning here. I'd like you to listen for their confidence. It's not a performance, but listening for their understanding of the text.
So,
So you can see that in this clip, the students are confidently engaging with foundational structures like wa, no, des, janai des, and these high frequency elements are really the backbone of natural Japanese, and here the students are using them in context, not memorizing them in isolation. The language is limited but rich. They own this language, which gives all learners access to the meaning and a sense of success. So you'll hear real communication, not just recitation, and that's where the magic of acquisition happens. And this is a message I received from Angie, the Japanese language teacher who was involved in the early literacy project and using the JapanEasyReads approach in her classroom. She wrote, "Huge change in the year fours today, more confident reading. I think it's starting to click." That phrase, starting to click, really stayed with me. It captured that powerful moment when students begin to recognize words, not decode, not translate, not panic, but simply read. And that's the shift that I'm really passionate about. We want to encourage and see a change from effort to ease and from guessing to genuine comprehension. So students are beginning to feel successful and they're starting to believe, hey, maybe I can do this after all. And that's the kind of transformation that we're working towards. Not just better results for reading, but better relationship with the language. So when we design our languages with autonomy, competence, and relatedness in mind, we create classrooms where learners feel empowered, capable, and connected. And when we shift the focus of our lessons from can they decode to do they understand the meaning, we open the door to greater inclusion, greater fluency, and greater joy. And I'm very much looking forward to continuing the learning through the early literacy project into term 3. And these are some of the resources and references that have framed my my thinking on this topic and the backbone of the early literacy project. And here are some ways that I can help you if you're interested in learning more about acquisition-based learning, comprehensible input, and extensive reading. Please reach out. I have a YouTube channel where I share some Express PD videos on these topics. The Language Hub, the JapanEasyReads Language Hub, is a community of supportive teachers and we focus on building up our skills in acquisition-driven instruction. The bookstore there is where you can access the graded Japanese readers that you've seen in this project. And on Instagram and Facebook, you can follow me or email me at monique@japaneasyreads.com. Thank you. I hope this has been helpful and ganbarimashou.